Two young ladies, wearing eclectic costumes, powdered white by the ever-present alkali dust of the Black Rock Desert, slow their bicycles near our camp before calling out, "Where are we?" Where are we? Good question. Welcome to Inside Game of Gods, Episode 2, where we talk about the introduction. You know, those pages that you tend to skip, that you tend to ignore. Well, in this case, you probably shouldn't.
I agree. I think absolutely essential to read this introduction because it gives you direction, a roadmap of how to read this book, and an absolute idea of why it was written.
Right. It sets a tone. If you skip the introduction and you skip the scope, which is the few pages or the page right before the introduction, you're really going to miss how the book is put together, the direction of the book, the purpose of the book, a lot of things. So it's important. I really struggled, as you know, in trying to put together an introduction.
I laugh because if you know Carl, introductions and conclusions. Anyway.
Yeah, I know. They are my nemesis.
Your
Absolutely,
nemesis.
my nemesis.
Yes.
And so for me, when I came out of Burning Man 2017, I was excited because I had something I could sink my teeth in regarding the construction of the introduction. So the introduction really wasn't. I didn't begin the introduction in a significant way, and work it through until 3/4 of the way through the writing of the book. And I mean, that's just how it is.
It worked.
Right. But going to Burning Man in 2017 gave me that angle that I needed, that perspective. And specifically the opening that we just did, that little snippet where we had the two bicyclers come up to us, those two young ladies, who are lost. And at Burning Man, it's pretty easy to all of a sudden not know which street you're on. And I remember Bob, who was with me, saying, "Yeah, where are we?" That's quite the existential question. And that's what got me going about, Bing, yeah, that's the introduction.
Yeah.
This is about trying to understand where we are on this grid of politics and philosophy and religion and culture. And so that was, for me, that was that point when the introduction was coming together. And so if you skip the introduction, you're going to miss a lot regarding why the book even exists to begin with.
And we've had people who have written to us saying, I'm not quite sure I'm understanding where you're going with this book. Or
in conversations with some people?
Absolutely. Why did you write it this way? And I think the common thread in that is, did you read the introduction?
I know.
And the common thread is, no. I didn't. And so, point to be taken, read the introduction.
Yes.
Because it really, really does give you an idea of the who, what, when, where, and why.
Yeah, the introduction here is that springboard, and if you miss it, you're going to flounder around a little bit. You might be able to, I know a lot of people figure it out really quick.
Exactly.
But it is going to be important in that respect.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But does everybody know that this wasn't the first introduction? Let's talk about the first introduction.
The first introduction, the introduction that became a book. Man, you could actually make that as a title for an article or something, right? The introduction that became a book. Well, in this case, that's true. It was the introduction that became a book. My first introduction I wrote was back in, I think, the spring of 2015 when I was really kind of ramping up where I wanted to go with this concept, this project that was bubbling in my head. And so I wrote an introduction, and it was 30 pages. I know. It's a 30-page introduction. I pitched it to an author in British Columbia who's a personal friend, and I said, "Hey, read my introduction. Kind of give me some thoughts. Let me know
if you think it's a good idea for a book.
what it does for you,
And he said?
And he came back and says, "You've written a thesis." But then he said, "Slice it up. take that introduction and slice it up. Don't add, don't change, just slice it up, break it into short chapters.
Did you add?
Well,
Honey?
I broke it up into chapters, and it became part 2 of the book. And so, yeah, the 30 pages morphed into, well, part 2 begins on page 31 and ends in page 200 and something. So,
what part of don't add do you not understand?
No.
Anyway, it still worked.
I'm glad I did, though.
I know.
Because it made the book into what it is.
I want to focus on what's actually in the introduction that they need to know.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that's in there is the why. Why you wrote the book and why they need to read the book.
Right. Yeah. There is a section towards the back of the introduction where you talk about the why, because that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I think sometimes there's just so much information, like why then present this information? Why wrestle with these issues? And I break it down for the general reader in 3 ways, and then for the Christian audience in 2 other ways, because it was written more for a Christian audience than anybody else. Really, the first reason was so that we're not uninformed, that we see past the hype, past the sensationalism. And in this day and age of social media, and that's, in a way, this book is a pushback against some of the memes and misinformation and just the nonsense and garbage that gets pushed through social media. Yeah. And social media has done an incredible job of just rousing emotions and firing out, allowing us to fire out all kinds of stuff, whether it's true or not. And I wanted people to have when they have this book in hand, that there's something meaty about it. There's a context that they can go to, that they can build on. It's not a meme. This isn't just a soundbite. And you need to be able to see past the hype, the rhetoric, the sound bites, all the packaging with the misinformation that we're being given.
The sensation.
The misinformation that we also spread, in social media, because everybody does it to some extent, at least it seems to be. So that's one reason why I think it's important to have a book like this. It'll ground you, to help give you that perspective, to go beyond just the hype and crazy stuff out there. And that's an important factor. Number 2, and I have this written down, to connect the dots of your own life experiences. And every month since the book has been published, people have been coming forward, and you know it.
Yes, that's been exciting.
It has been exciting.
I've really enjoyed hearing from people who have said, hey, I read your book, I was in the New Age, or I was in Wicca, or, these kind of things, and now I know why I was in it, now I know how I got in it, and I understand now what I was thinking. Yeah,
it allows you to connect dots, and connect the dots of your personal life into a bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly.
To recognize that what you are doing is really a reflection already of a much broader panorama that's unfolding all around you.
Yeah, exactly.
And when people recognize that, all of a sudden they go, wow, all right.
I get it.
Now I get it. I get where I was. Now I understand where I was, and where I have gone.
Right, and where I've come from and how I got there. I think it's been fascinating to see them follow the dots.
Yeah, I know. And so, number 2, connect the dots in your own life. And so this book definitely helps you to do that. Exactly. And then number 3, and this is very important, is that, so we have a proper equipping of ourselves, and then to equip others around us that we're responsible to, our family, our friends. If you are a church leader, to help you better equip your church, your congregation. If you're a youth leader, to help better equip your youth group to understand how culture is transforming, why it's changing, where it's going, where it was, and now where it's going, and where we are on that grid, the crossroads, the overlapping grid of culture and politics and philosophy and movement. So that's important. But then for the Christian, there's 2 other pretty important reasons. And just allow me to read that for you so that people understand where this is going. For the Christians specifically, to know how the biblical message is being challenged, and primarily those truth claims central to the faith. Then to recognize how the culture is preaching to us, seeing past the packaging in order to spot the pitch. In doing so, we become responsible in at least two ways. One, to wisely inform, exhort, and uphold those we are responsible to, family, friends, youth groups, and church congregations. And two, to recognize opportunities in bringing biblical truths into the conversation. This goes on with Acts chapter 17, the model that we use, taking the approach of the Apostle Paul in Acts 17, knowing, recognizing, and leveraging the dominant worldview to share a more sure answer.
Okay, one other spot in the book, in the introduction, that I really want to focus on because I think it's absolutely incredibly important for people to understand. And so often we hear personalities dragged through the mud. They're maligned. We malign them.
Yeah, we abuse them.
We abuse them. And this book does not do that. And I want you to read that little spot in the book, in the introduction, that you talk about that, because I think it's absolutely important, because it's different than a lot of other books.
Yeah, this, again, I think this is, I'm hoping that by putting this in the introduction, it sets that tone that I hope is carried through the book. And let me read this, because I think this, you're right, it's important.
It needs to be read,
Right,
yeah.
right. Personalities are mentioned, but care is taken to focus on concepts and beliefs more than individuals. We can scrutinize, criticize, probe, and reveal without resorting to depreciating someone's character. At times, this can be a fine line, one that I've crossed in my own life. I know that. Nevertheless, as Christians, we are to love our neighbors, including those who fundamentally disagree with us. This does not mean sugarcoating uncomfortable topics, but neither does it mean acting disrespectfully or bearing false witness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have brought it, but we have a quote that you made. Actually, I wrote it down because you said something. We were sitting at home talking one night, and you were talking about how we are not to bear false witness against people.
Against a lot of things.
Well, against anything.
Yeah,
right? But,
yeah.
But especially people.
Right.
And as a couple, I think we've tried very, very hard to give everybody a fair shake, because they're just people.
Right, right. And, okay, there's a reason why I take this approach, all right? And it goes back to a radio talk show I did back in 1999. Back in 99...
You were old then.
Oh.
You're older now.
Thank you. Back in not sure where, I kind of know where that comes from. Back in 99, I was coming back from Dallas, where I went to a World Federalist meeting, a world government meeting.
Right.
It's one of the events I don't talk about in the book. Mm-hmm. And at that meeting, I had spent the day with Maurice Strong. For those who already are well-versed in this subject, the name Maurice Strong will ring a bell. Mm-hmm. And I'd spent a day with him. He's from Manitoba. I'm from Manitoba. And so we hit it off, and we spent time together. And back in the 90s, he was one of the most influential men in the international community. I mean, he was the go-to man.
Yeah, absolutely.
UN Secretary Generals sought his input. Mm-hmm. He was made a special advisor to the UN. Canadian government, the World Bank. The list is just astronomical of what he did.
Right.
And that includes a lot of global governance policies and ideas. He was very instrumental in pushing global governance.
Absolutely.
So that's why he was at that meeting, and that's also why I was at that meeting, to try to understand, all right, where's that going? Right. It was my return from that meeting. I sat in a studio, I'm not going to say which city, where I was being interviewed about that event. And the radio talk show host knew Maurice Strong and what he did. Didn't know him personally, but he knew him and his background and what he had already achieved for world government and for
Right.
global governance.
Which was a lot.
A lot. And throughout that interview, he was dropping hints, like some significant hints. Just rail on the guy. Just, rail on him.
Give us some dirt.
Give us dirt. I mean, he's the Antichrist. Seriously.
Okay.
I got to the point where during one of the breaks, because this is in studio, the host takes off his headset during the commercial break. I take off my headset, and he just looks at me and he says, I'm not sure what more I need to do to feed it to you. Just say, he's the Antichrist. I'm like, I can't do that, dude. He's a human being.
Yeah.
He's a human being with a soul.
Yeah.
And this is, I will have to be careful because I could use some pretty strong language, but even after he died, how people in the Christian community really were saying some nasty, nasty stuff. And so I'm like, nah, don't do this, guys.
Yeah.
We attack the idea. We go after the belief and the consequences, and we work to understand this from a worldview, spiritual perspective. But if it wasn't him, it might be me if I didn't have Christ.
Yeah.
It might be you. So let's keep that in mind. Let's give some grace as much as we can to the individual, even when their worldview and our worldview runs contrary, and in fact, sometimes contrary in a real significant way.
That's right.
But we have this tendency in the Christian community to go after the individual sometimes.
Boogify.
Yeah. And it's not boogify. That's good though.
I coined that.
But it's but it's not just individuals. It's lots of things, movements, and yeah, I mean, rightfully so. We need to expose and go out, and try to unpack this. Mm-hmm. But then let's unpack this from the perspective of the belief, the consequences,
Right.
the cause and effect.
Right.
And yes, as I said, I'm naming individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I do name individuals,
Yeah.
but I try not to name them and to speak of them in a disparaging way.
Yeah.
Because really, honestly, I'm hoping that we can see past that and go into something bigger and something more meaningful. And Christ does say we're to love our neighbors.
Right.
He didn't put a qualifier on it.
No, exactly. And here's the thing. Maybe some of those people might read the book.
Actually, yeah, we already know some have, and some
Yeah.
some are.
Right.
Right.
And we're praying that this book will actually get into the hands of people, and maybe they'll see their name in print this way, and hopefully not say, okay, yeah, he doesn't agree with what I'm saying, and he doesn't agree with what I'm doing, but he makes a point.
I'm going to wrap up this episode with a line from my book. I realize I've read a few lines already.
That's okay. It's your show.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. You may do what you want.
No, right. To my friends who are globalists, all right, to my friends who are globalists, transhumanists, atheists and agnostics, who are burners and spiritual explorers of those of other religions, I am thankful you are willing to read my book. To my friends who are socialist-leaning, Christian and otherwise, I am grateful you are willing to consider what I have to say. For the many Christians who are concerned about the direction of church and society, who know something is amiss, but find it difficult to grasp where we are, I trust this book will be of value. To those who cherish liberty, may this reinforce the seriousness of freedom, and thus turn our hearts to the only one who can truly set us free. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode of Game of Gods, Inside Game of Gods. And if you haven't had a chance to read the book, I would encourage you to do so. You can get it on Amazon. And please, if you have read the book, take the time to give us a review on Amazon as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'd love to hear from you too.
Yes. And check us out with our webpage, gameofgods.ca.